Sheriff Sit Down, presented by our great friends at Our Community Credit Union. Mason County Sheriff Casey Salisbury, Jail Chief Kevin Hansen. Good morning, guys.
Morning.
Good morning.
You guys have been talking often, it seems like, with representatives from some different places, including, Grays Harbor and county commissioners and things like that, on kind of a work plan forward on how we're going to fix this jail situation we have in Mason County. What's the latest on that?
Well, last week, the county is, I guess you'd say they hired or contracted with an architect company, and they've been working us through the plans and the projects. As you know, we've been looking at the differences between a regional and a local jail.
Yeah.
And we had another sit down with them last week, and they told us where they were at in the project. And I'll let Chief talk to that because they asked for a large piece of information to help with their planning process from the chief.
Yeah, so they were concerned about. They asked. It was actually a really good forum. There was the Grays Harbor was there, the commissioners from up there, the jail chief, the sheriff representative was there, and of course our contingency was there. And the initial meeting was kind of to try to get a feel about what our philosophies were, with both counties about how we run a jail, because that's going to drive how they construct it or how they plan the construction of a jail.
What does that mean? Kind of more of the rehabilitation aspect of it, or the more of a counseling aspect versus more of a hard incarceration? Or, I mean,
there's different styles of different thought processes on that, and some of it is driven by how the jail is constructed. And sometimes over the years, jails have been built for a certain philosophy, and that's kind of how ours went through a couple different changes.
Yeah, we want people to stay out of jail. We don't want them to come back, and so we want to create a jail that's going to be big enough and have program space and have services available to them to help them, so that hopefully when they get out, they don't come back. Sure. And so that's going to require a different footprint than what a jail that focuses on just locking people down and and separating people from the community for their sentences. So that was a big driver about how they are going to perceive like blueprints and location and things like that is operational philosophy.
Is there much daylight between Grays Harbor and Mason County when it comes to the philosophies behind that, or is that something that you guys both
I think they're pretty similar, probably. I mean, Chief Hansen's been doing this a long time, but I recall when jails were just like a cell, and you put somebody in there and they stayed there for however many days and they got out with no assistance, and the problem was you just let them back out and they go right back to the same thing. And they started to learn through nationwide studies that simply doesn't work, and they started to plan with different types of programmings after that and building jails to a little bit different philosophy. And our jail, I don't remember what year it was, I wasn't here, there was a big grant that went across the country for this particular philosophy on jails, this open concept room thing that they did, direct supervision, I think is the name of it. And our jail received some money and they made it into a big room, but then it became back to where those are for pretty low classified inmates, and with one supervisor for a whole bunch of people. And now it's gotten to the point where we've got so many upper end type inmates that we can't use that. I'll let Chief talk to that. This is your business.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, direct supervision is minimum security people that get to live in a big open dormitory style area with, say 50 inmates in a big open room. Sure. And you have one staff member that's in there with them, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Well, unfortunately, the low risk people are out on programs, which is not unfortunately. I guess that is fortunately because they're not behind our walls, but they're out on home monitoring and day reporting and work release, and they're actually paying to be incarcerated. So that leaves the very little people that are eligible to fill up that 50-man unit, and it becomes very staff intensive and not cost effective, because you may have one officer in there for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and there's only 5 or 10 inmates in there.
Oh, I see. I see.
So it just doesn't work.
How far are you?
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask how far you guys are on the process of kind of determining a location. I would imagine that we here in Mason County would like it as close as possible for transporting, and I would think Grays Harbor would be the same. But is there any closer conversations on where
I think
this thing
that's
may
the
be?
important part about what this K&B company is doing, because they have done a great job of researching all the geographics and everything and putting this in, and they're working on this for a number of more months before they come up with a recommendation on should it be two separate entities run by each of their own counties, or should it be a regional jail, which would be more cost effective for now and in the long run, is what I like what they're doing. And they're looking at all those issues. What I was really glad to hear is they're taking into account the transportation times, because equally as difficult for Grays Harbor County is if you're out in Westport and you make an arrest and you've got to drive all the way to Mason County. Well, that's a long way.
Yeah.
As difficult as it would be to drive from Belfair out to Westport. So they're looking at possible locations, and there's all kinds of things that are figured into that: transportation times, holding times, how to get people back and forth to courts, and they're doing all those measurements. I know that the chief last week and the week before has brought in piles of documentation from our office for over the last, I can remember, at least 10 or 20 years of our numbers of arrests and things like that, and they're putting all that in to figure that out and give the best recommendation they can to the county.
And these jails across the country, or even in just Washington, they're not all the same. Obviously, the size of parcels of land are different when it comes to the building area, but you're not going to have the population of Mason County is this, the population of Grays Harbor County is this, so we'll add it, do some math, and then all of a sudden you're going to get Plan C, which provides this many spaces. It's all unique based on, like you said, the philosophies, but then also the need, right?
Correct. Yeah. And projected need, 20, 30, 40, 50 years in the future. Because what we don't want to do is we don't want to be in the same position we're in now. In 1985, when they built a jail, it was no bigger than the old jail.
Yeah.
And so we want to look down the road and make sure that whatever taxpayers' dollars that we use are, we use them the most efficiently as we can, and look into the future so we don't have to do this over again in another 20 years.
That was my biggest concern. Is I look at the old newspaper articles that they built that jail and it was full the next day. I don't know what the thought was on that, but it had some additional space, some office space, but really the number of patients, the number of inmates held was no greater. And within the first year or so, there was an article in the paper about the jail's full and they just built it. And that's what I had, that concern. I worked at Thurston County when we went through this once over there, and then there were issues between the sheriff and that commission over there about staffing, and he kept saying, I'm not going to support the new jail until the staffing levels will be supported to do it. And there was no listening on the other side, and they opened that jail and it sat for 7 years or so without anybody in it, which was absolutely ridiculous. But all those things that I sat through, I tried to write down I had a whole list of questions for when this firm came in, and that I thought they're going to forget this, because I remember these things being very problematic. And they looked at all those things. I was very impressed that they had taken all those into consideration and looked at some of those other places that were struggling. And I think they've done a really good job.
I know that Commissioner Schutte had planned to join us this morning, but obviously he's not here. How has the relationship working with you guys and the county commissioners on this process been?
Fantastic.
Yeah, I think Commissioner Schutte, Commissioner Trask have been very, very interested in this. And Commissioner Schutte was, I want to say that was Commissioner Schutte that initiated the first communications with Grays Harbor County Commission and bring us together on that. And he's done a really good job of keeping us informed and looking to the future, which I think has been another issue with Mason County over the years. They haven't looked down the road far enough. And this is a big deal. This isn't a small item here. This is a big deal for our county and the future of our county. And when you look at when people move to a location, the first two questions they ask are about crime rates and about where do I want to send my kid to school? What are your schools like?
Yeah.
And in whichever order, those two are always the first items asked. And we get calls in our office asking, where should I send my kid? Where should I not? When I worked in the other county, they'd say, what would be the best area to move into? And it's really important when you can look at your crime rates. People look at those things before they move to a community. And our challenge has been is that we simply don't have the space. People say, well, you're not taking these people to jail. Well, because we can't. Our people are making the arrests. Our people are making referrals. But when you've got 268 to 312 people a month that you can't do anything with, they're going right back into your community, and it creates more of a problem.
What would be And I know we're way away from any sort of ribbon cutting, but what would be a timeline if everything moved as smoothly as you guys would want?
Well, the study's going to be done early next year.
Okay.
And then it's up to the Board of County Commissioners because we're going to have to find funding. And let's just say that in 2021 it gets put to the voters, and the voters say, yeah, let's build a jail. And then we're still another year out before you'd even break ground.
Okay.
So this process streamlines that timeline. I mean, it takes all that year that we're spending now off the front end, and as long as we don't procrastinate and let this thing drag out another 5 years, so we have to do another study. This is we're well ahead of the game here.
There have been, I believe, I think I've got them all in my office, 3 or 4 studies over the years since before I was here and since I've been here, that we're going to do a study on the jail. And every time they come back, says, guess what? The jail's way too small. It's not doing what it should. And those organizations have done it over and over and over again. So we pretty much, it hasn't gotten any bigger.
And those studies cost money too.
Those studies cost the county money. Those were, I think all of them were previous to me being here. At least 3 of them were. And we're looking at that. The other thing it's kind of interesting that this is a good thing, but it better not be a bad thing. There's a number of other counties that have jails that look very similar to ours because they were built in the same era, and they're all looking at doing the same thing. And I guess the challenge for me is, I guess it's a good thing. We've done quite well on accreditation standards and what our office has been, how we've been showing statewide as a county in the sheriff's office of the quality work that's being done, to the point where my undersheriff was asked by another agency to come sit in with them and show them what we're doing in our office for efficiency things. And then I've had a number of calls recently because other people are looking at jails and they're all asking for a jail chief that's actually built a jail, which is very rare.
Sure.
And we happen to have one of the only ones here. And so as recently as last week, I had another county sheriff call me and say, hey, we'd really like to borrow your jail chief. And I said, well, he can talk only from the phone. He's not going anywhere.
He's not going anywhere.
But it's really important to have somebody that's done it before, and everybody knows that. And so we're getting calls here about Chief Hansen's background and knowledge of actually having been one of the chiefs that's gone through this process.
That was down Lewis County, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And so, and he's been around a while. So getting those phone calls is really nice. And recently had a call we'll have him on, but one of my sergeants that just took us through accreditation, and now everybody that's trying to make accreditation. And we're one of 5 counties right now in the state out of the 39. There's only 5 that have done it. And we're one of them. We've done it twice. And now they're calling saying, hey, can we borrow your staff to help us and show us what we need to do? So that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But, I always turn around and look at what they're offering and pay and things. And I don't want to start losing people when we have great experience and great people.
Mason County Sheriff Casey Salisbury, Jail Chief Hansen, good to see you guys. And the Sheriff Sit Down brought to you by our good friends at Our Community Credit Union. Thanks for coming on.